Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
I've been doing this podcast since September of 2012, and boy, are my lips tired.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. Sam Page can't join us today also because he's off doing a couple things, but he'll be back next week. But I do have a guest joining us today, and her name is Victoria Wieck. Let me tell you, she's a perfect example of the very famous American rags to riches story, because literally she arrived here in the U.S. In the 1980s with just a few bucks in her pocket, and over time turned that into a multi-million dollar empire. So, I mean, it is the classic story, and she's here to tell us about it. So, Victoria, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me. Hey, congratulations for being in the podcast business since 2012. Very few people back then.
Yeah. Actually, next month is my anniversary, so it'll be 10 years next month, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, there were a lot of people who don't even know what it is yet. You know what I mean? So you've been there for a long time. Yeah, exactly.
Podcast, what are those things?
Yeah, how do I go and find
I got an iPad. Button? How does that work?
Yeah, exactly.
But well, that's part of the discovery process where technology is concerned. But you had another discovery process because you arrived in a country that you didn't know. You're from South Korea, if I read the profile correctly. Yeah. So you came from a completely different part of the world to a country you didn't know. You knew it maybe by reputation, but that was about it. And tell us what happened at that point.
Yeah, so my parents, I grew up in South Korea. We weren't super rich or anything, but you know, when you're a kid, and we were upper middle class when we were a kid.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you don't really know much about finances or anything. And I had everything, right? I had food. We had, playtime with my parents and all that. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. We lived right on the beach. It was really nice.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
Yeah, this was like we lived on a little island where we didn't really get TV signals there. Like it didn't get that far. We had a TV, but you know, it got mostly snow.
Well, with a beach, who cares? I mean,
right, exactly. We were out there all the time. But here's the thing: back in South Korea, my parents they had 4 girls and 1 boy. I'm the oldest of the 5. And they believed that back then women didn't have a lot of opportunities there, other than, you know, looking for Mr. Right. So since they had 4 girls, my parents wanted the girls to have, more opportunities. So they brought us here.
Oh, okay.
And upon coming to America, they found out that all their accounts were frozen because you weren't allowed to take your money out or anything.
Ugh.
And then they froze the money out back there too at home.
Crazy.
And Korea was run by a military dictatorship at that time. So they were stuck here with $30 with 7 family of 7, 5 kids and parents. They didn't speak English. I didn't speak English, and life looked pretty gloomy. I mean, we lived in East LA. Most of the kids came to school with switchblades, and there were all kinds of police presence at the end of after school every single day, literally every single day. So, and not much has changed in that area anyway, but. You know, coming from an area where it was really idyllic living to that, it was like a real shock.
That's shock. That's culture shock in a big way.
Culture shock in a big way. And when you don't speak English, you don't have any friends. You know, we didn't have, back then, there wasn't like a lot of immigration, and there were no English as second language classes. Right? So you had to kind of immerse yourself right in. So I did the one thing that I could do for myself. My parents went to work basically from 6 o'clock in the morning until about 10 o'clock at night every day, 7 days a week. So they worked 2 jobs each. So, I thought to myself, what is the one thing, is there anything I could do for myself, basically? And so I decided, learning to speak English is a pretty big thing because we couldn't do anything without learning to speak English.
Yeah, sure.
So my father had a dictionary, like an English to English dictionary. And so he would circle any words with fewer than 5 letters because that was easier for a kid to understand. So, he would just randomly circle them and I would look for the definition. And then when you look for an English, like if you were to pick up, let's say, Japanese language, dictionary, and you were picking up Japanese to Japanese, okay, all the explanations are all English, so you end up with a bunch of words you don't know.
Right.
So I ended up, just learning words the first year, and that's how I learned to speak English. And I had a few friends, but I didn't have a whole lot of time because I started working when I was 15 years old.
Boy,
So
yeah.
from that beginning, I ended up building a small business um, because I wanted to be a mom. When I tried to do the corporate thing, I realized I was going to leave my kids with a nanny so I could have a career, which is,
Mhm.
something I didn't really want to do. So I started a business, and that business grew to over $500 million in sales. And the most important thing I want to say on this podcast is this: I did that because I wanted to spend time with my children,
Mhm.
and that was never negotiable for me. So
Mm.
I always prioritized, their day. So I was there. I drove all the field trip things. Did their homework with them. So I kind of built my business on a semi part time basis. And it's a really interesting story because you'd be surprised when you have those non negotiables, how much more productive you can actually be.
In other words, you ran into basically a situation where everything around you was hard walls, and you had to figure out how to negotiate the hard walls because there were
Yeah,
no other
and
options.
right, there were very few options, and you had to kind of think outside the box
Mhm.
and really believe in yourself because I mean, things didn't change much from that time to now. Like when I started my business, everybody told me, "Oh my God, like you have an education." Because by that point, I did get double MBA and graduated from UCLA, then USC. So I was
Wow.
qualified, and I ended up having a great corporate job. But so my parents, my relatives, my bosses, colleagues, everybody told me, "You're crazy. Don't leave. You had an excellent career path. Don't leave all that you worked for because when you start your business, there's a 95% chance of you not succeeding. And when you don't succeed and you want to come back to the workplace, you're going to have to start at the bottom. So,
Mhm.
don't do it."
Mhm.
But I didn't really see a choice because in corporate at that time, back in the 80s, in order for you to get a decent salary, you were basically trading it for a life, you know,
Yeah. Mhm.
6 a.m. to, midnight, 7 days a week, pretty much. Because, even though you're not physically there, until midnight, I brought briefcases of work home every day.
Sure. Yeah.
So that was not
So
great.
life was work, or work was life,
Right.
depending on
Yeah.
how you
Right.
wanna
You
say
didn't
it.
have a life. Right.
Right.
Right. Exactly.
So you made the decision. What the way you're telling this, you're making it sound like these circumstances decided things for you. But I get the sense because I mean I know what it's like to make that jump from corporate to diving off the deep end and starting a business and not having any clue whether or not it's going to work for sure, or anything
Right.
like that. There's no guarantees. In order to make that leap, you've got to have something going on inside. It's not something
Right.
that you do lightly. What
Right.
did you have going on inside?
Well, first thing, I told myself, when I was in East LA going through school, I also worked 40 hours a week while I was at UCLA.
Hmm.
Um, Going through a school, I wasn't born on this earth so I can just starve and suffer for the rest of my life.
Okay.
There has to be a purpose to my life. And as long as that purpose, I got to go find it. I got to give it my best. And if I
Okay.
give it my best and it's not good enough, that's my fate. That's my destiny. But I have to try that. And the other thing I was thinking too is like I was very successful in corporate. Like, I became a director of marketing, then VP of marketing very quickly.
Mm.
And I helped a Moroccan immigrant. He passed away recently. I remained friends with him for the last 30 years or so. But
Mm.
Moroccan immigrant who didn't speak any English himself,
Mhm.
and he came here literally like he jumped a freight ship. He actually was working on a freight ship, jumped it, and
Wow.
he was picking puka shells on the beach for $1. He actually made a necklace for $1 in Hawaii.
Wow.
But by the time I ran into him, he was doing about $150 million a year
Mm.
in gold chains, and he had like Mr. T, Vanna White. Those were all
Oh,
his
okay.
ads.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I joined the company and, he absolutely loved me. He gave me all kinds of opportunities, let me make mistakes and, he just really believed in me. And, part of it is because he was so impressed with the degrees that I had. But basically, I just thought, if I can, well, 3 years after I joined his company, we were doing about $450 million a year. We launched some amazing things. I did some marketing campaigns and everything. And I thought to myself, you know what? I could continue working for his dream, or I could start to build my own. And
Mm,
so, I had a great understanding. I told him I would never compete with him directly in the categories that he was in. He was in, gold chains and stuff like that. And I did everything other than, even to this day, that's the one thing I don't do.
okay.
He's passed away last May, I think. So basically, that was what was going on in my head. But on the other side too, though, is I felt like there was a real void in the marketplace for the type of jewelry that I was going to that I was doing. And one of those was, basically when I came here, jewelry was sold on a snob appeal, more or less. A
Hmm.
lot of people just bought, like, this is a 2-carat diamond from Tiffany's, or, my husband
Right.
got me, this is a 4-carat, but whatever. There didn't seem to be a whole lot of style at that time. And at that time, there was like a daytime jewelry, nighttime jewelry. There was really, women were just starting to go to work outside the home for the first time in a professional capacity. Like, we had titles like director of marketing and things like that. So I thought, you know what? I don't understand why there's like no personality reflective jewelry out here. There's no
Mm.
jewelry that you can wear that's sophisticated, understated, that you could work in a workplace. I mean, you either had like fancy diamonds, you had like junky plastic jewelry. So I felt like there's a huge void
Yeah,
in the market, and there was just a lot of uphill battle when it comes to the money part of it, because jewelry is a one that has a very high barrier to entry.
sure.
So I just realized I'm gonna lose battery. So I'm gonna plug this in really fast. You
Oh,
keep
sure,
talking.
yeah. Do a little swappity do there, no big deal. I'll just tell people about a couple things coming up in uh, later on this week. Well, first of all, this coming Thursday, the show that I will normally do on Thursday, I'm actually going to take that day off, do another beach day, because, well, I need to get to the beach. That's all there is to it. So Louise and I are going to get away for that day. But coming in for the rest of this week, tomorrow and Friday, we have special guests joining us, as we've been doing most of the time here on the show. In addition to talking with Jody Lynn on Wednesday and Dan and Debbie on Friday. But the guests themselves are interesting people to be sure. Tomorrow we're getting Heather Shannon joining us. Heather is she's a rather remarkable person in that she's all about the energy levels. She's all about humor. She's all about being quotable, and she's about entrepreneurship. But she also has a rather interesting twist on it because she's a certified sex therapist. So this is going to be a really interesting show that we have tomorrow for you. And we'll have more about that later on. But okay, looks like Victoria's back, so you got everything straightened out. That's good.
That's good. Yeah, I just look at the battery low. It's flashing at me.
Yeah, we don't want
So,
that. That's
yeah,
like, yeah,
no,
not a good thing.
right.
You said something interesting. I want to kind of cut over to that right now. You mentioned how with your Moroccan friend who hired you, and I kind of
Yeah,
get the sense he was also a mentor to you too. You said he let you make mistakes, and that really
right.
caught my attention. Why did you think then, and why do you think now that's so important?
Well, I learned on his dime. I mean, just amazing things. But so my old boss, his name is Guy. He, he came here by himself. Like, he jumped the ship and he was picking up puka shells, and he basically sold it for $1. And I think he told me he like worked a couple years just to be able to buy a ticket to come to San Francisco, where he was
Mhm.
able to then, sell like individual pieces of jewelry. So, he's got an amazing life story. But um, I think he was very impressed with my degrees, and he hired me right out of school. And I made some mistakes. Like, for example, he launched a herringbone chain. Herringbone chains used to kink a lot, and that wasn't the major source of returns. And he found a way to make it so it's more flexible. And we called it like Super Herringbone or something like that. And they had Vanna White, Mr. T, all these people, advertising it.
Mhm.
But the industry later on, and we had a trademark and all that, and I was in charge of all of that. He let me do the work with the lawyers and all the stuff.
Okay.
And later on, the industry, because they couldn't call it Super Herringbone, they copied the stuff, and then they called it Super Flex.
Uh-huh.
And that name kind of stuck in the industry.
Mhm.
So, I told him, that was just like so stupid. Like it just, and he's like, you know what? We live and learn. We learn. We just have to learn from these things. So next time we came up with something, like we came up with like a rope chain that didn't look like a rope. It was a lot silkier.
Mhm.
Next time we actually trademarked like 20 names: silky rope, velvet rope, silk rope. What we really wanted was silk rope, but next time we make sure that no one else can touch the category, right? So there's a lot of little things, what works, what didn't work, what the American public actually will pay for. He came up with like he was the one that came up with like, best mom, best friends. We called them talking charms. And, by the time the competitors started copying that, we were ready at that point. So, he let me, whenever I made some mistakes, and I was kind of hard on myself, he would always say, you know what? Everybody makes mistakes, but this wasn't that big of a deal, and we learned, and we always did, and so we kept on growing. So I always appreciated that, and
Well, when you said that, it reminded me of something that Elon Musk says. He says this particularly about what he told his engineers at SpaceX as they were
yeah,
developing the SpaceX rockets. He said, "Fail early, fail often." He
right,
wanted them to
right,
go out and
yeah,
make a lot of
yeah,
mistakes because he knew
right.
they would learn faster that way, rather than the way NASA had done it, where it took them like 20, 30 years to learn how to do something.
Right. Well, if you look at the Amazon story too, a lot of people think that Jeff Bezos never made any mistakes.
Yeah.
And I mean, his mistakes were so many. If
Oh, yeah.
you probably recall that he didn't make any money for like 20 years. I mean,
Mhm.
for every quarter,
Oh, yeah.
he would go on CNBC and talk about how he, lost less money this quarter, and it
Right.
just went on for every quarter.
Yeah, it was
But
almost
I
like people
mean,
had like a drawing going on, like, let's predict how long it's gonna take for Amazon to go under. That's pretty much what the take
yeah,
was
yeah.
on television all that time.
But if you remember, like their Fire, most people don't remember this, the Amazon Fire phone. They had a Amazon Fire Stick, and then they had a
Mhm.
phone,
Yeah.
and they sold it for like $599 or something, then $399, then 99. You know, at the end of even with all their prime people, they couldn't even give it away for $1. They had to
Right.
actually hire hazmat people to take it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But here's the thing. They learned a lot from it. They
Mhm.
learned a lot from the technology, what people wanted, what they didn't want, because in that Fire Phone, they actually put too much into it, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
at the end of the whole thing, what came out of that incredible failure called the Fire Phone, um, what now is Alexa is it's exact same team. They
Oh,
came,
yeah.
that became a pretty, they kind of control the world right now. So I think, when I started my own company, I let my employees make mistakes, in a very confined way, and every time an employee would make a mistake, we would learn to never make the mistakes in a bigger stage.
Mhm.
So, when I launched my company, like, the jewelry business was very much done in New York, LA, Chicago, mostly New York. We had Saks Fifth Avenue, Macy's, all those people in New York.
Right.
But my first business trip, I went to Dallas
Mm.
because I thought, "You know what? It's a big enough market where I can actually get a really good read, but if I start to make some mistakes, no one's gonna care." I didn't wanna make my mistakes at a place where it's gonna matter to me later on?
Mhm.
So, it just turned out I did make a few mistakes, and they weren't critical, but, it would've at that stage in my of my business, if I had made those mistakes when I was in New York where the stakes are bigger, I probably would've gone under.
Yeah.
So,
Sure.
yeah.
I understand that. So there's again an illustration of just how valuable it is to make the mistakes early because you save yourself from making them later on. You also mentioned Dallas, and it brought to mind something. This is somewhere around episode 1783 or something like that. I don't know what the exact number is. My fifth episode was with a gentleman named Fred Cuellar. I met him and talked with him in the last part of 2012, and he had also made his fortune in the jewelry business doing
Hmm,
custom jewelry, and
mm.
he had started in the 1980s. So I'm thinking, wow, this is a real big complete circle that we're drawing here
Right,
from
right,
10
right.
years ago to today, because you have
Yeah,
very much the same kind of thing going on there.
yeah.
So talk a little bit about how you got into the design part of jewelry.
Yeah, so now that's really interesting. So When I was in school in South Korea, women didn't have a lot of opportunities, right? So, they if they went to college, they'd go to college for like affluent children, females would go to get a degree in something like home economics. They actually had a master's degree in home economics, piano, or something that wasn't really academic. So, I would always tell my mom, like whenever they would ask you, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I would say something like Van Gogh, so I was very drawn to art. And I won all kinds of art competitions, little kids competitions. Now we're not talking
Yeah,
kindergarten, things like that.
sure.
And so when I came to America, the first 6 months or so, I didn't speak any English. And even though I was learning words, I
Hmm.
couldn't actually put them together.
Right.
And so I usually communicated by drawing things out. Like, I would tell my teacher, like, "I need to go to the bathroom," or, "Where's the bathroom?" I would actually, draw those out almost like a Pictionary type thing.
Sure. Yeah.
So I got very good at it. So it allowed me to learn English faster, actually. When you
Yeah.
draw like a toilet, they would say toilet, and so I would know what that word means, right?
Right. Right.
So, eventually, so that skill of communicating quickly, visually
Hmm.
was very, so I learned to do that. And then when I went to college, I was still working basically 40 hours a week off campus. And UCLA is like a very demanding school to be able to do that. It's a quarterly system. And so I didn't have a lot of friends. I didn't have, like, like a sorority event or anything I could go to.
Mm-hmm.
So few weekends, when I came home, downtime, I would either read fiction. I'm a huge fiction reader, or I picked up painting, and I would paint to express my emotions, express, what I'm seeing outside, if I'm happy or whatever. So when I became a jewelry designer, my jewelry designs actually have a very close emotional connection. It's not just like, oh my God, that looks like a flower. Or if I'm doing a butterfly or something, it doesn't look like a stick butterfly. It looks like, there's usually a purpose. Either it's landing, or it's leaving, or, it's doing something. So American public really had never seen like critters in jewelry that's really done elegantly,
Hmm.
fine jewelry wise. So it just took off pretty, and
Nice.
then, yeah. So my marketing message was all about reflecting yourself, your personality, and leaving a piece of you, a part of your personality, your legacy to your future generation. As long as you're buying jewelry, you might as well get something distinctive that reflects your personality, your pocketbook, your lifestyle.
Hmm.
And that became a very interesting marketing message too, because it's not anything about snob appeal at that point.
Right.
It's really about giving you permission to be who you are.
You're kind of reminding me of that long ago interview that I did, episode 5 with Fred, because I'm remembering one of the things he talked about quite a bit, how he expressed it a little bit differently. He described it in terms how there was a very traditional approach to jewelry, and everybody did it, and that's what all the
Yeah,
jewelers handled, and so forth. And here he was; he wanted to actually create stuff in his back room and sell that, and they all
yeah.
told him it was ridiculous, and he ended up doing it anyway. Was very successful with it, and his way of expressing it was he wanted people to have jewelry that met their personalities, which is very similar to what you were just describing.
Yeah, in costume jewelry, it's easier to do because that's what they're supposed to be for.
Hmm.
In fine jewelry, it's harder
Yeah, oh,
because,
yeah, and he was
yeah,
telling me about that
yeah.
because he was doing it all with diamonds and gold and so
Yeah,
forth.
in fine
Yeah, it's
jewelry, it's a
tough.
little harder. Yeah,
Yeah,
so, because you're taking a bigger risk, because if you don't sell it, you're taking like a 70, 80,
yeah.
90%, markdown on that. But there was, a huge guilt factor of, well, here's the other thing. When you went to work, I mean, when I went to work in corporate, I had these like Robert Talbot, like navy suits with the white collar, and we even had little bow ties like men do.
Okay.
That's how we went to work. That's how women were expected to dress for work,
I
in
see.
little miniature suits and little pumps, with stockings on.
Wow.
And if you see a bunch of corporate people, like, walking from a place or to a place, and you just saw them at like just maybe even 30 feet away, you couldn't tell one woman from another woman. They're all
Yeah,
looking
of
different,
course.
right?
Right.
So, jewelry, sophisticated, understated jewelry, allowed you to be looking like you're successful.
Sure.
You're understated. You had, and when you're going for job interviews, you look like you're somebody who is successful, who's going to take care of yourself, who's going to reflect the company well. So, that actually became a part of my marketing message. And
Mhm.
so, worked out great, so.
Yeah, apparently it did.
Mhm.
Obviously, it succeeded wildly, almost beyond your wildest.
Yeah.
Did you ever actually expect it
Sure.
was going to get as big as it did? I mean, seriously.
Yeah. So actually, the biggest part about building anything is being able to set goals and stick to it.
Hmm.
So, like, when I left the company that I worked for, and I was making really good salary at that time, so that made it
Hmm.
harder for me to leave. But
Sure.
I thought to myself, you know what? I'm only willing to work 20 hours a week because I've got two kids.
Hmm.
And so if I'm only working 20 hours a week, obviously I'm not going to expect to make, 300 grand a year doing that.
Hmm.
So what can I expect to make and what can I live with? So remember, it wasn't that many years since I left Korea when
Yeah.
I started my company. It was
Sure.
within just a few years. So I thought, living in East LA where my American dream at that time just was something like if I could just buy a used Camaro for myself and I can pay my own rent so I didn't have to share it
Mm,
with my 5 other, my siblings, 5 of them.
right.
Um, that would be a dream come true. So from that
Hmm.
point to when I had my own children now, I thought, if I could just make $3,000 a month, I could, and I'm working 20 hours a week, and
Hmm.
that's not non-negotiable. Then I could pay my rent. Rent was about $1,200 a month for me.
Hmm.
I could pay my rent. I don't need a new car for the next 10 years or so. I
Hmm.
could pay my rent. I could feed my kids. And I'm just going to give up any dream of owning a home for now,
Hmm.
until the
Okay.
kids are growing. And so, in order for me to make this, but, I did the math and I thought, okay, 3,000 bucks a month would be great first 2, 3 years. But if I don't make it, I could live on 2,000 a month. So, so my goal was the 3,000 bucks a month. And I
Sure.
thought, what would I need to do to make the 3,000? If you looked at, we didn't have internet, we didn't have email systems back then, so we had direct mail pieces,
Right.
and I couldn't actually, I didn't have money to buy direct mail lists,
It was
so I
expensive. People don't
yeah,
realize how expensive
yeah,
that was.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
So I thought, you know what? And I didn't have money to print catalogs. Catalogs are very
Hmm.
expensive to print. They're
Oh,
fifty,
yeah.
$60,000, for a thing, and then they're expensive to mail. So I thought, I took I had a 35 millimeter camera, and I took pictures of, it wasn't professionally done, but I got
Sure.
a little light box and did it, and I would bulk print it, and it was like 19 cents to get it printed.
Okay.
And I would send like 4 of those, like in an envelope to
Hmm.
Neiman Marcus, Saks Fifth Avenue. I sent them to like, Harrods, London, all these places, because 4 of them actually went in one first class stamp. Okay.
Ah,
So
okay.
with a nice little,
Yes.
cover letter. And, the first class stamp was like 8 cents or something. But I didn't have a list. So I went downstairs. I lived in a big city. They had all these travel agents back then. The travel agents always had, names and addresses of all the gift shops. So I would just sit there, volunteer to answer their phone calls, but I actually would just write their addresses down. So I
Ah.
did about 50 of those every single day. And we had like IBM Selectric, so I had to actually type these letters
Oh,
out.
wow. Yeah. Now you're really
Uh,
dating yourself.
yeah. So I did. So 50 was a lot of work, but I did it 50 a day. But I could do that when the kids are, asleep and all that. So after 50 a day, I thought, if I get 5 of those people to just respond, yes or no, or get me more information, um, that'd be great. But I actually, you're supposed to get even less than 5. But if
Mm,
you're doing it every single day, though, because I only needed about 5 people a month to respond for me to actually make the 2 grand. So, I did my, introductory letter was very, very targeted. So when I wrote the letter, it wasn't like dear customer. It would
right.
be, dear Walt Thiessen,
Mhm.
I love your jewelry. I particularly love your, tennis based collection that you had, and I noticed that you're doing really well. And what I have can complement what you have, things like
Right,
that.
right.
So, it turns out my closing rate was actually you're supposed to get like a 2% rate, but
Mhm.
I actually ended up getting about more than 10%. So
Whoa. Yeah.
I want to say within the first 18 months, I did over $1 million, believe it
Wow.
or not.
That
So
that that's gotta be a shock. I don't care
yeah,
how you
yeah,
slice
it
that. That's
was.
a
It was
shock.
crazy. It was
Yeah.
crazy. So then you had a whole other issue because I couldn't finance the business,
Mm,
the vendor. I mean, it was just a whole other issue. But I want to say like the first million was just hard work. But
mm.
the other thing too is like, when people started calling me back, they would call me back at a very inconvenient time for me because my kids are basically up. Most of my customers are in the East Coast, so they'd call me
Sure.
9 o'clock their time, which is 6 a.m.
6
my
AM.
time.
Yeah, right.
So, 6 to 7 a.m. I can answer the phone, but 7 to 8 a.m. I'm taking my kids to school. So, I thought, you know, coming from Korea, I know like my aunts and everybody, like they're in a different time zone. They're a day ahead, like 16 hours ahead of me. And it's like you have almost like a day and night flip.
Mhm.
So I thought, well, someplace around the world, it has to be 9 a.m. So whatever time it was always someplace around the world, it was 9 a.m. It's like
This
someplace in
is
the world
true.
right now, it's 2 p.m. somewhere, 5
Mhm.
p.m. It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Right?
So, I realized like 6 or 7 a.m. my time is about noonish in 53 different countries in Europe.
Oh, okay.
So I started sending, like little faxes. Believe it or not, I sent like drawings of my drawings because a lot of buyers have never seen like a real actual rendering before. And in those days, when something came by a fax or by FedEx, it got right to the person's name.
Right, because it was rare.
It
Yeah.
was rare.
Mhm.
So, and I only faxed it because it was cheap. It was like if I called somebody, it'd be like 3 minutes. And international phone calls were like $10 a minute.
That's right. Yeah.
But if I faxed it, it was only 6 seconds per
Yeah.
page. So,
That's right. Yeah,
it
sure.
was like
You had
12
all the
seconds.
economics figured out.
I mean, I didn't have any money, and
Right.
so I it like I found out that all these European buyers, they love American goods. So I ended up opening Harrods and Galleries Lafayette, and then once I opened them and I was in all their catalogs, Neiman Marcus, it was like, oh my god, like you're at Harrods, I come on over here. Then when I
Mm.
was at Neiman's, Saks Fifth Avenue, like just made everything a lot easier.
Sure, yeah.
But I kind of did it only because, out of necessity, because I didn't actually want to work when my kids were up.
Yeah, sure.
And when I picked up my kids between 2 o'clock, I picked them up at 2, and I left my home at 2, and I picked them up about 2:15. From that to 8 p.m., I stayed with them, did their soccer, basketball, everything that they wanted to do, and then they went to bed about 8:30. 9 p.m. California time actually is, 11 o'clock in the morning the next day in Tokyo and Hong Kong and New Zealand and everywhere else. So I actually ended up opening a whole bunch of department stores back there. So I had a global business before I had a domestic business, believe it or not. So
Apparently, yeah, which is pretty
yeah,
wild. It's
it
kinda
was pretty
backwards,
wild.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, very interesting, though,
Yeah.
very interesting. I know we don't have a lot of time because you have another event you have to
Yeah.
go do after this, but I
No.
wanna talk about, what you're doing today, particularly trying to help other people who come from perhaps a similar background or are experiencing the similar kinds of challenges you were experiencing. Let's talk about that side of your life now because I think that's a pretty important part.
Yeah, so I'm actually at the end of my career. One of the first things I set out, I told my husband is, like I don't want to work until the day I die. Like that's what my father did. He literally retired on Friday, died Saturday.
Wow,
You
yeah.
know, and my husband's father did the same thing.
Mm,
So we basically decided that we need to have a point at we're not going to keep working. At some point, we realized we had a goal, like a little goal, and in the best case scenario, like absolute best case scenario, you got a min max scenario, and we also promised ourselves like within 3 years. He had his own business, which real estate business, and it was pretty rough too, but within 3 years, if either of us are still like losing money or barely breaking even, we're going to shut that business down. Okay.
mhm, okay.
And then, but if everything went well, and we did like $300,000 in net profits or net income, then it's time to like start thinking about like really, because at that point we're completely beyond reached beyond our biggest dreams possible,
Sure.
right?
Okay.
So, we did a lot of charitable work, gave a lot of money away, did all this stuff. And I don't think I've even made the 275 or whatever since I was like 28 years old. I made a lot more than that since then.
Right.
So right now I'm at the point of just helping other people succeed, lifting other people, and just improve. In my father, he's not with us anymore, but my father, my grandmother, we come from a family that dates back to the year 1310,
Mm.
and they've always said that um, in our family, you can have the money and the fame and education, all that, but you're not successful until you can make other people successful. Because
Ooh, I
truly
like that.
successful people do that. This is what
Yeah.
they do. So I'm actually at that phase. I've been at that phase for the last 5 years. I do a lot of free webinars, teaching people storytelling, because as you know, I have a TV show, and in TV retailing, we have to do somewhere between $2,000 to $6,000 per minute, every minute you're on. So
Mm.
you really have to know how to tell your stories, brand positioning, and how to really identify your target market, all that stuff. I have a book coming up that kind of, you know, it's the best buy in the world, because it gives you exactly the formula. Because, I did the $500 million with less than $10,000 of advertising total career.
Wow. Is that right?
Less than $10,000, no outside help. I've never had a partner. I've never had investors, never took out a loan. It was just all organic growth.
Wow.
We're sold over 10 million pieces of jewelry just here in America. So I'm not here to brag about myself. I'm not here to inspire people. I'm not here to encourage you, because all those inspirations and encouragements and motivations mean absolutely nothing if you don't take action.
Mm.
And you have to figure out what actions you are going to take, and what do you really want out of life. Because if like with me, I wanted to spend time with my kids, and that's something I treasured, and I've always had that time. Now I welcome my grandchild. She's 1 year old now, and
Oh, wonderful.
I told my daughter next year I'm going to completely retire, because I can.
Hmm.
And it's not going to change my lifestyle one little bit. So, and the other thing I'm going to tell you is I've never changed who I am. It's like I don't have anything fancy. I drive a Yukon. I could drive whatever car I want, for
Hmm.
now at this point.
Sure.
But those things didn't matter to me,
Mm.
and I still, like, I don't have any fancy purses. I have a backpack. It's comfortable for me. Um, it's
I love
just,
that from a jewelry designer. That's wonderful.
yeah, I mean, it's a nice backpack, like I had it designed for me. It's a vegan leather thing. Because backpacks, you only have like JanSport backpack, which I carried for a long time,
Hmm.
or there isn't a whole lot of options, so I've not got one for myself. But
Mm. Okay.
the point is, like, I understand what it feels like to feel hopeless. I understand what it feels like you're constantly climbing uphill or swimming uphill, and the minute you stop, you feel like the whole world has gone by.
Hmm.
And you don't have to feel that way, but it's up to you, because like if a girl born in Korea who didn't speak any English comes over here and can do what I can do,
So what does
you
it
got
take to do that then? I mean, because that's really the key point, isn't it? How do you make that switch in your mindset?
yeah. So obviously this interview is only 45 minutes. So
Yeah, we
I
only have
have
about 5 left. So
yeah. So here's the thing: I have free webinars. I don't do them often because I don't have a whole lot of time. They're completely free. Like this Thursday, which is too late because by the time this broadcast, it'll be over. About 2 days from now, I'm doing a free webinar. It's titled "How to Build an Empire While Working Fewer Hours." And it's just like there are like 5, 6 pillars of skills that you have to really understand how to master. One of those
okay.
is personal branding. It's a lot easier if you brand any kind of brand. It's easier to sell them than if you have to explain every single time what you're all about, right? So the
Mhm.
personal branding is really important, and personal branding is not something that you can't conquer with no. I mean, my brand is not like Victoria Wieck Jewelry is not like a household name like a Gucci,
Mhm.
but in the jewelry world, it means a lot. It's one of the most searched name, and it's a trusted name. So I was able to build that. Um, So I teach people how to, like, get their bios. It's really all about, think about the two things. One, I love this quote by Maya Angelou, and she talks about how, people will forget what you said, what you've done, but they'll never forget how you made them feel, right?
Mm.
So that is absolutely critical. When all of you who are in small businesses right now, if you're looking, even bigger corporations do, they make the same mistake. They talk about themselves a lot because you feel like you have to justify that you're an expert. You have to justify that you have experience. You keep talking about, like if you're selling hardwood floors, for example, you might say something like, we're the fourth generation and we've been in business for 60 years and, we're the best and we won this award. It's all about we. Rather than saying, "Hey, are you sick and tired of all the confusing, information you're finding on hardwood
Mhm.
floors? Are you sick and tired, are have you ever wondered, do you actually need hardwood floors? Is this something you want?
Mhm.
Does hardwood floors actually add value to your home? Because these are all the things that those people are actually thinking about. So you're
Right.
actually the minute when you say those things, even on a website, and by the way, if I'm talking to anybody, I always check them on the website while I'm talking because I wanna know what kind of presence they have. But instead of saying we're the fortune, who cares if you've been there 60 years? It's like saying, "Oh my god, this Lexus has been around, driving for 50 years." Well, I want a new car. I want one that's been around for 50 years, right? So, instead of saying, like when I go on TV, I usually follow somebody. By the way, TV retailing has like 99% failure, rate,
Very good point.
I've been I think I have been on TV longer than any other human being for 25 years now. So here's the thing, a lot of times I'll follow somebody who says, "Oh my God, I just won the Jeweler of the Year award, and I was at the Grammys last week, and everybody loved what I had on, and here are pictures of me and whatever movie star she was with, and I have designed this wonderful collection for you." Okay, that's one way to talk about, who you are, that you're a, accomplished designer, so you won all these awards and, you hang around with movie stars. You could do that, or you could come in and, just we're talking to middle America. You could just talk about, hey, are you glad that summer is finally here, but you can actually have some summer vibes and summer fun with, friends that you haven't seen for 2 years. When you go out, you wanna permeate just a little spark, something. You don't have to break your bank. And here's just a wonderful piece of, collection that's made just for that, for family and friends. And you could have it today for 25, percent off. Um, Two very different messaging.
Very
One
different.
talks about you, what you're gonna do, how you're gonna permeate, how you're understated, and how you're gonna save money. And the other one's talking about me, me, me.
Mm.
So, a lot of times your beginner entrepreneurs think that they have to establish their expertise quickly. And the way they do that is by telling them how great they are. You almost have to look at it the other way because like the hardwood flooring guy, you could sit there and say, "Hey, you know what? Are you sick and tired of, getting conflicting messages? Are you sick and tired of, way out of what prices?" Then you've come to the right place because we have been, serving people exactly like you, for the last whatever, and you can talk about some people you've served and their testimonials. So here you're saying the same thing you experienced, but you experienced specifically to help people like you rather than this, thing that nobody knows about, right? So that's one. And the other thing, I mean, I can't go over all the things that I teach, but the other thing I want you to remember is there's this quote by Nelson Mandela, and it's a very lesser known quote by him. And it's one of these interviews. They asked him like, what was it like to spend 30 years in prison? And did you
Mhm.
ever give up hope? And did you ever think that you
Sure.
were ever going to get out? And he just humbly said something like, "You know what? It all seems impossible until it's done."
That's a great quote.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
until
really
it's
good.
done.
Yeah.
So however impossible it is, a 1,000-mile journey starts with the very first step.
Mhm.
You gotta take the step,
Right.
right?
Otherwise, you don't get anywhere.
You're not gonna get anywhere. And, going back to what you said earlier, which is when people, like, are contemplating, "Do I launch this product? Do I, have this marketing plan, or do I launch this ad, or, what do I do?" And, I wanna do all these studies, and you hire consultants and all this stuff. Well, just go do it. You know what? Get a poll, today you can do all kinds of polling on social media. You don't even have to act like, it's you could act, there's all these online services now that can actually take a real life poll with a real life person
Mhm.
and launch it small. What's going to happen is you're going to learn. They might say, oh, those designs suck. She's done that like 20 years ago. Or somebody say, oh my God, what a fresh perspective. I mean, they're going to differ, but you're going to get a common thread out there.
Mhm.
So what happens is, it's like you can't, if you're going from here to New York, you can't see every single traffic accident, every single thing that could happen to you. When you actually see a traffic accident, you might actually want to pivot. But
Mhm.
but if you don't
Good
ever
idea.
start, yes, if you don't ever start, how are you gonna know,
Right.
right? So it's okay to make mistakes. In fact, I'm gonna say to you that making mistakes is one of the key ingredients of success, real
Yeah,
success.
that's what I think too.
I would say do a planned failure because
Mm.
what I do is like when I go on TV, remember I've had a show like every month, right? So every month I'm on like 6 to 9 hours, and that's a lot of hours when you're
Mm.
considering like infomercials like 2 minutes or something. But when you're doing live that many hours, it's a lot of hours.
Oh,
So
yeah.
let's say last month I sold a bunch of watches, tennis bracelets, some rings, and I look at the comment. In fact, my buyer just told me he was really disappointed with something that didn't sell last time I was on. It was like $565 pink something. But all the white stones at that price point sold.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
So I think to myself, okay, so all the white stones sold, people want simplicity or whatever, fine. But so in the fall, so even within all the whites that sold, was it all the white that sold, or was it whites at a certain price point, or was it whites that were updated classics? I look at that and I go, okay, well, you know what? They actually bought whites with updated classics. Okay. They wanted to get something that was really classic, but they wanted a little bit of a modern twist. So I do it. But then when I do the next one, I go, I can do the updated classics, but how updated do they want? Do they want some innovation with it or not? Or maybe it wasn't that they didn't like the pink. Maybe they didn't just like the style of that pink. So because I can't just keep on giving them white forever, because at some point they were all going to die. So what about the pink? Was that maybe
Mhm.
they didn't want the pink one at $500? Maybe if they're going to buy pink, maybe they want it at 200. We don't know. So I might actually, it's worth trying it because it wasn't that bad. It was
Mhm.
a little slow. He was disappointed because he thought it was going to go, gangbusters.
Right.
So I might do 2 or 3 styles in pink, knowing that's risky, but the whites that I did is money in the bank. I can count on a certain amount of money coming in based on the last result. So these new things that I'm testing, I do 5 more styles. Maybe they all bomb, but I have reason to believe a couple of them actually will succeed. So if they do, I can then build on that. So that's a planned failure because
Yeah.
3 or 4 of them are going to fail.
That's very interesting. I like
Right?
that.
So
Yeah.
that means, my buyer isn't gonna buy 10,000 units of each of those. They're
Mhm.
gonna buy a few hundred, very, very cautiously. They might even work out a deal with the vendor. Ship only 200 units now, and if on the day she goes on, can you FedEx the rest?
Right, right.
So basically, having failure is a good thing. 'Cause, it's like if you don't wanna fail and you're so afraid of failing, it's like if you take a kid skiing, okay, and the kid says, "I don't wanna fall, so I'm gonna be on bunny slopes forever." And, okay, well, my kid was like that, fine. But then the minute she fell on the bunny slope, she realized, "Oh my god, I didn't die. I don't have blood on my nose." And that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So that's the day she said, "You know what, mom? I wanna go to the bigger slopes."
Yeah, there you go.
Then she broke her knee at some point, but,
Well,
point
that's
is
another story.
yeah, that's a whole other story. But you know what I'm saying? It's like, show me a downhill skier that never fell.
Mm,
They fall, during Olympics. Show me a
sure.
gymnast who never fell
Yeah,
or figure skater.
right.
So I'm just you gotta embrace the ability to fail, but you gotta have to. The biggest problem with entrepreneurs is like the whole world tells you, the chance of you succeeding is nothing unless you have something really chic and whatever, or a ton of money, you're not going to succeed. And, you don't have time, blah, blah, blah. So they don't think they're going to really succeed, but they do it. They get the courage to do it. Then something goes wrong. They're like, oh my God, I should have listened to so-and-so. I should have listened to
Mm,
Walt. He told me I wasn't going to make it.
mhm.
And then I go, no, wait a minute. That wasn't that bad. right? You sold some, you didn't, whatever. Why don't you, we know what's at least the two things that are working. Let's say you open a restaurant and, people only ordered one dish. Well, okay, well, we know what's working, right?
Mm.
So the person says, okay, you know what? You're right. I finally figured out like they only want paella and the rest of it they don't want. Okay, fine. Then they go a couple more months and they make a second mistake and they're like, okay, this time I'm just gonna shut it down. They shut it down. You just gotta I would say don't ever give up hope. And just have some grit and you gotta keep remembering that if you're not working on your dreams, then you're right now working actively building somebody else's American dream, and that's you might regret that at some point,
That's a great
So,
point. That's a great way
yeah,
to finish this up too. That's a
yeah.
wonderful point to wind up on. Hey, before you leave, we need to get a couple pieces of information from you. First of all, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing your
Thank
story.
you.
Tell people how to find your webinar and your $1 million
Yeah,
passion. I can't remember what you called it. But yes.
right. So come to victoriawick.com,
Okay.
victoriawick.com, and you will see the two books that I wrote. I wrote a science fiction and I wrote a $1 million passion. It's really 7 simple steps on how you can actually exponentially grow your business. And then you can also sign up for I think there's like 6 different webinars that you can sign up for. It's only limited to 50. I usually get over 1,000 people per month.
Wow.
It's limited to the first 50 people because I want to be able to still answer questions and actually really impact your business. And if even 50 is very pushing it, but so sign up for any one of those. There are topics there and you're going to need, if you're going to be successful, you're going to need all of them. And it's completely free. I don't spam your email. I don't push you to buy anything.
Hmm.
It's really my public service to
That's
society, I
wonderful.
guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and we'll include the links in the show notes to make it
And you
easier
can
for
come
people to
to,
find
yeah,
it.
milliondollarpassion.com is linked to it, milliondollarpassion.com. And that has my books, all the courses. And also, I have a podcast called Million Dollar Passion as
Oh,
well.
okay.
So, yeah, people can come. And, mine's a little different because I like to interview people that it's a transformation podcast. So I love rags to riches stories.
Hmm.
And I like to interview people that have no college degrees. Most of them don't even have a high school degree, and they're
Mm.
all multimillionaires
Mm.
by doing kind of like what I did, which was to kind of listen to your heart, listen to your gut, turn your passion into profits, and then grow it like crazy. So, I mean, I do have a few people that have college degrees, but I have like 100 episodes, and almost all of them are like construction workers that are hanging out with Elon Musk, people like that.
Right, right,
So,
right. Yeah.
it's crazy, but
That's good though. I like
yeah.
that. That's
Mhm.
really good. Well, thank you again for joining us, and thank you also for all that you're doing for people. There are a lot of people. There are probably hundreds of thousands of people you'll never meet, you'll never see, who
Right.
you're touching, who you're helping in ways that you don't know about. And we don't often hear this, so I try to make it a point to say this. Thank you on their behalf. Thank you for
Thank
what you're doing
you.
for them,
Thank
even though
you.
you'll
Yeah.
never hear from them, because you're making a big mark on people's lives.
It's my joy, it's my honor to do that, to be in a place where I could actually help out. So, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for joining us. And thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.